When you have someone hot beside me, I'm like, maybe. But when he's smart and hot, oh my god, and when there's two of them. Hey, what's up everybody? It's me, Sasa, and this is Straight and Sasa. Life update. If you didn't know this about me, I'm 17, and so in my city, I was just able to get my vaccine. And I've been waiting to do that so that I can see more of my friends. Let me hear the crowd in the back. Yeah, we are down one shot and we are bound to get another. Anyway, for today's video, we're gonna be discussing the books that I read for October. I was in a huge reading slump from months August to September. I literally only read one book in September. So that says a lot about my reading for this month. To be honest, I'm not sure if I read 10 or 11 books this month. We're gonna start the first book that got me back out of my reading slump, and that is Throne of Glass. So I read the first two books in one go. I read Throne of Glass really quickly actually. I feel like I read it for like 2 days only, as well as the second book. Throne of Glass, I rated it a 4 out of 5 stars. I wasn't enthralled by the world at an instant, but I found love for some characters like from the get-go, and which is why I rated it a 4, because typically I don't rate very highly first books in a franchise or like in a fantasy series, because I know that it's not always the strongest point of the book. So I rate it a 4 because it's always about world building, and I really think that Throne of Glass had a very effective way to open up a new world. And definitely it's for young adults and it's not mature, and to some it might be a guilty pleasure because it's not necessarily the best, but I will say that it is a very good series. And I'm talking about Throne of Glass as if it's not famous. It definitely is, and I get the hype. I just haven't gotten into it earlier than I should have. For the second book, I did rate it 4 stars again. But this time, the difference with it is that I was now understanding and like, now I get the hype. Like, I get the hype. But it wasn't, again, my favorite yet. So I still gave it a very safe 4 stars. When I got to the third book, I rated Heir of Fire a good 5 stars. Heir of Fire, to me, hit every button I wanted to be pressed in a young adult fantasy. To be honest, one of my favorite characters definitely has to be Dorian. Dorian has my heart. Okay, the thing about the third book is that there is finally something devastating that okay, that's a lie. Throne of Glass is definitely devastating, but to me, the third book was more like, okay, finally, we got something to lose here. Lost something that can't be taken back. You know, that was what I felt with the third book. It felt so final, it felt so, even though it was quick, brief, I don't want to spoil anything, but I decided that and there, I'm like, okay, I'm finishing this series. I don't care if the rest of the books get boring. I will finish the series. I want to see through its end. After my little Throne of Glass era, I read Vicious and Ninth House. I read these both in the same timeline, and I also did finish it, I think, the same day. For Vicious, I rated it 4 stars. 4 stars, to be honest, 4 stars to me is amazing. 4 stars is already a good rating to me. And so you will notice that this month I gave out a lot of 4 and 5 stars, which means that this was a really good reading month. Vicious is told in a perspective of a villain. Victor and Eli started out as college roommates, brilliant, arrogant, lonely boys who recognize the same sharpness and ambition in each other. In their senior year, a shared research interest in adrenaline, near-death experiences, and seemingly supernatural events reveals an intriguing possibility that under the right conditions, someone could develop extraordinary abilities. So basically, this kid, Victor, and another kid, Eli, who happen to be best friends, you know, their ego is probably too big for their down theirs. So they end up trying to achieve that extraordinary abilities in those very specific conditions, and brings the relationship down for the worst. And then it ends up being like this like feud of both their prides and egos. Like, that's basically the premise of the book. But I did really love the characters in it. It's quite interesting, and at first I was like, this is probably not a 5-star read, but if I read it in another set of circumstances, like maybe if I read it in one go with the second book, I probably would have rated it 5 stars. For the book that I read simultaneously with that, I read Ninth House. I did mention that in my first video, and I did try to vlog it, but I hated all the footage, so I decided not to push through with it. Ninth House, I'm actually pretty surprised. I don't remember it rating it this low. I rated it 3 stars, but 3 stars is also not bad in my like calibration. 3 stars is, I get why it's good. I did not get bored at any part of it, but it's just not my favorite. I did not love any of the characters. I feel like the character I loved the most was the character who wasn't actually in the entire book, and they were literally just talking about him. Ninth House is a dark academia book set in Connecticut, I think. The main character basically grew up without a father, you know, had a mother, and she grew up seeing like these ghost things. The Greys, I think they're the Greys. She can see these things, and it's not normal to be able to see these things. And so she's a mystery in herself, but they just decide to accept her, like, okay, she can see the Greys. She might not be as dedicated to this job, but let's give her a chance, because her mom is a hippie and she's really nice and all that. But since she was a child, she had like this very traumatic experience with a Grey one time, and it really like fucked her up. And I definitely think that's one of its strongest points in this book, is that it's very, very emotional in that sense. Trigger warnings for people who are sensitive to sexual abuse and rape scenes in books. Definitely avoid this book if you cannot take stuff like that. But it only happens one time, and it really, I don't want to spoil anything, but it really explains a lot of like how Alex, or Galaxy, her real name is, turned out the way she did. And I think it's a very, very interesting point of view, because then again, this is fiction, and this is entirely like out of this world kind of fiction. It's a dark academia, but it's like there are very specific terms, very specific powers, very specific cult terms, you know? And I'm kind of like bored. I'm kind of iffy on the, you know, the inclusion of like rape culture in that genre, but at the same time it makes a lot of sense, and you know, it also does show like what it can do to a person. So I feel like it can either be very big turn off to whoever reads it, or it could also be a very good uplifter and be like, okay, now I understand the character a little bit deeper. The book is divided into a bunch of like timelines. It's like fall and winter, and like one of that is the present, and the other one of that is like in the past when she was just starting out her job in that cult or in that group. Ninth House, I really did enjoy all the scenes where the guy who was teaching her and showing the reins around, you know, Ninth House, I loved all the scenes with him in it, and I also really did love him as a character, but he genuinely wasn't there the whole time. And so the second book, I think, is about finding him. I think I will definitely be reading the second book when it comes out. Okay, oh, this is my favorite read of the month. This is If Cats Disappeared from the World. I rated it 5 stars. I love this book so much. It's very short. It's only 202 pages, and I feel like that's a very big factor of why I rated it a 5, because it's not necessarily extraordinary or, you know, extra special, but it is a really interesting and light-hearted read, even though it's kind of like sad and very emotional. If Cats Disappeared from a World is, I'll read the description, a beautiful moving tale of loss and reaching out to the ones we love, of one man's journey to discover what really matters in modern life. The main guy finds out he has like a tumor or like some kind of terminal illness, and then a devil in the shape of himself appears and says, you know, if you give up one thing a day, you get to live a day more. And so he decides to roll with it in the start. And this guy is very like, I don't care anymore. Like he works, he lives his life, he stays healthy, but he doesn't really have any more aspirations and big goals in life, and he's very lonely, and he only lives with his cat. You know, it's a story like that. And like this experience, taking out each item after another, really showed him what he loses as, you know, these items go away. And it's really beautiful. Like there's a movie adaptation for this book. I actually watched the movie before reading the book, but I was really confused, so I had to stop in the middle. I actually watched it because the actor was Sato Takeru, who's like one of my favorite Japanese actors. But I did not understand the movie. The next book I read, it's After Dark by Haruki Murakami. This is also by a Japanese author. The way Japanese authors write, they're a different breed. They have a specific way of writing, and I don't understand like how they come up with the stuff that they write, because it's always so whimsical. And I don't want to like bunch up Japanese authors together, but they definitely have like a similar taste. He writes women pretty terribly, but I give it a pass, even though I'm a woman, because I do enjoy his writing. And I rated After Dark a 4 because it's also very short. Okay, here's the thing about me. If the book is very short, I tend to rate it higher because I love short books. Like, I love when I can read something very quickly. After Dark definitely finished it in like a day or a little bit more than a day. After Dark is about, it's like a tale. Yeah, let's say it's a tale. After Dark is a tale about this like one whole night. It starts at this specific time and ends at this specific time the next day. It's basically only like less than 12 hours, or like within that time span. It's like this guy who goes to this cafe or like this restaurant. It's like, oh hey, I know you. I know your sister. What happened to your sister? You know, and like, didn't we go swimming that one time with your sister? Weren't you her escort and you were supposed to be the girl for me? Like, it was something like that. And then he eventually says bye, and then it's revealed that that sister apparently has been in a state of deep sleep for like months now. And it's really weird. And if you're not into Haruki Murakami, I don't recommend this being your first book. But if you already like some of Haruki Murakami's work, this one is definitely a very quick read, and I love the writing. Sometimes I don't even get what Haruki Murakami is writing about, but I just really love whatever he has to write. That's all I have to say. Next book that I read is The Inheritance Games. Love The Inheritance Games. I loved it. I definitely rated The Inheritance Games higher than the second book. I rated it 5 stars. It was very quick. It was only 376 pages, so that's already a plus for me. And I genuinely did not know what was gonna happen. This book kind of like pushed me to do a little bit more mystery. I realized that maybe I'm starting to become a mystery reader, and because of that, you can expect a little cute video about mystery books. I'm not gonna tell you what it is gonna be about, but just expect it. Anyway, The Inheritance Games was definitely a great book to me. Okay, The Inheritance Games is basically like Knives Out, except young adult. There has to be something about like this teenage girl who's extremely intelligent, just ends up receiving all the inheritance of a really rich dude. Like, when I say rich, I mean like billionaire, trillionaire dude who has a family, and they have no relation whatsoever, and he just passes on the money to her, and she's like, who the is this old dude? I don't know him. I don't know any of his children. I don't know these people. Why am I here? And then you quickly realize that she's not out of place. She's extremely smart, just as smart as the grandchildren that the rich dude raises. And it's really interesting. It's a mystery, but not a suspense, in my opinion. It's not scary. It's just really mysterious and fun. It's a fun book. There's a love triangle, and I love love triangles, which is a very unpopular opinion, but when a love triangle is executed well, it's one of my favorite tropes. I mean, like, they're smart and hot. When you have someone hot beside me, I'm like, maybe. But when he's smart and hot, oh my god, and when there's two of them, that's such a hard decision to make. But the writing, to be honest, is kind of weird sometimes. Like, some dialogue, there's this line in the second book where she has this like kind of like mini feud with another girl, and then the main girl is like, yeah, like, let's solve this together. And then there's like this resolution, like, okay, now we're friends. And then all of a sudden she just says, Oh, by the way, I like your hair. They were literally talking about how the girl almost killed her, almost costed her her life. And then she was like, oh, by the way, I like your hair. That line, I laughed so hard. But other than that, other than the really weird, batshit crazy dialogue, I loved the book. It was fun, and I will definitely be reading the last book. This is the second to the last book that I read this month. It is The Bronzed Beasts. I rated this one a 5 out of 5 stars. No questions asked. If I could rate this even higher, I would rate it higher than it needs to be. This third book is definitely the reason why I will say that the Gilded Wolves series is one of my favorite series/trilogies I've ever read. The first book wasn't my strongest, like, I was kind of like, oh, let's give the second book a shot. The second book, I rated it 5 as well. I loved it so much. The third book is definitely my favorite. It was... I don't know how to explain what the Gilded Wolves is about without confusing you, because the Gilded Wolves is basic. If you've read Six of Crows, it's like that, except this is like wholesome vibe. So the Gilded Wolves is about like a heist group. They like to conduct heists, and that was what they were doing in the first book. And the world is kind of weird. It's not well explained, which is why I feel like it's not for everyone. But it's a historical fiction, and there's like queer, bisexual vibes, and I loved it so much. There's romance in the book, and oh, the thing I love about the Gilded Wolves is that they don't hand the romance to you on a silver platter. You literally, as a reader, have to fight for that romance. And it's kind of weird because in the second book, like, they're literally only 3 books, but so much has happened to the point that the main couple only actually happens at the end. And you don't even get to see them really being all like, I love you. It's a fight worth, you know, sitting in for. The end of like the whole series is definitely an end that I think it's one of the best ends I've ever seen. It's not a happily ever after. We're like, okay, great. It's a really, like, basically what I'm trying to say is you're gonna miss the characters a lot, and it gives you a very empty feeling. But at the very end, it's like, I'm back to life, and I'm very satisfied. I will really recommend this series. If you want to get into pretty writing in fantasy, this is the way to go. My Filipinos out there, there is a bisexual man in this book, and he is smart and hot. He is my favorite character in this book, and he deserves all the love he can get. We stan a bisexual king. And then we have the last book for the month, which is Macbeth. I'm not surprised if you don't know what Macbeth is about, because I also didn't know what Macbeth is. But I feel like it's not a story that, like, I don't want to spoil anything. Because Macbeth is basically just about tyranny. I don't know, like being corrupted by self-ambition and not being, you know, just wanting the best only for yourself. So basically it's giving into your desires and committing bad things just because of your self-ambition. At first, I really loved it. Like, I was like, okay, this is really good. But then I kind of wanted more. And so I want to read more Shakespeare. This wasn't my favorite. This also wasn't my favorite classic. So, I mean, I rated Macbeth a 3.5. I completely forgot that I also read manga this month, and I will count that in this wrap up. And I totally forgot to talk about it. And I really need to talk about it because they were so good. I picked up a random manga that I found on someone's thumbnail. I didn't even watch the video that recommended that manga. Like, I saw the thumbnail and there was this panel that they included that was so cute, and I can't find it in Storygraph. So I couldn't track it because it's a very new manga. It reminds me a lot of Waiting for Spring. It's a similar trope wherein, like, this girl happens to befriend these guys, and these guys are like bad boys, like spoiled brat boys in the eyes of others. Like, one is like about to take over like a company of his father in the future, and then another one has doctor parents, I think, or like manage a hospital. The other guy, like, his dad is probably like the leader of the Yakuza. But they're all so sweet, and like they're very not close. They have very toxic relationships to their family. Meanwhile, the main girl doesn't really have a father, but is very close to her brother, and her mother, but her mother is very busy with work and she also has to work because, you know, they have to pay the debt of her dad, something like that. If I could rate that on Storygraph, I would rate the whole like series, like all the volumes, a 5. It's not really the romance for me. I mean, yeah, the romance is really cute, but it's also the friends part that's really cute to me. Living no Matsunaga-san. You know what that manga is about. If you know, you know how cute it is. Living no Matsunaga-san is about a 17-year-old girl who moves in this share house because she doesn't want to be like, she doesn't want to disturb her parents or whatever. Like, she wants to be able to live on her own and, you know, be responsible. And so she ends up like going to a share house her uncle owns. You know how share house stories go, and you know there's always gonna be like some kind of romance. It is so cute. It is so wholesome. The thing about Japanese like stories and like manga and romance is that a 17-year-old and a 27-year-old is not pedophile for them. You know, I will give it a pass. That's what happens in this manga. And if you really aren't comfortable with that, then you do you. But in this case, the story is so wholesome where the guy himself is like, no, not until you're college or whatever, like, you know, we gotta take it slow. And it's not even the guy who initiates things. He had this like desire to protect her and he kept lying to himself saying that, oh, it's because she's like a younger sister to me. But no, boy, no, we all know that you're in love with her. There's nothing steamy, there's nothing like nasty, there's nothing inappropriate in this whole series. I love it. And I just rubbed my mascara off. So I think that is the sign that this is definitely the end of the video. Anyway, that's it for today's video. This is just a very basic wrap-up video, and I hope to be able to read more books for this month, for the month of November. Let's see if school gets in the way of that. But, I'm gonna try my best to be able to read more books, that I can talk about more books. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!